final episode. These are the recordings of the Film Folklore Podcast. Its mission? To explore topics rarely or never covered by other film podcasts, to seek out willing guests to relive their work experiences for better or worse, and to boldly uncover often lost and forgotten issues of the entertainment industry. And hello, film friends, friends of film, and everyone in between. Welcome to the Film Folklore Podcast. I am Jed Props, and I am joined today by Zoe Props.
Hello.
And Justin Sound.
Hello.
Joe could not be with us today because he went to see the Parthenon in Athens with a woman named Antiquity. Zoe, where's Chris?
Chris is with him. He is Antiquity.
Oh, that explains the cross-dressing.
Yeah, that's his thing now.
Oh, yeah.
So give him a break.
He had Ebola, right? And then he doesn't have Ebola. Mm-hmm. But he does love women's clothes.
Yes.
Yeah. Ebola does weird things.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, continuing with my nerdy Star Trek thing. So, co-host log 2025 on the Gregorian calendar.
Star date. Star date.
Well, that's 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. We don't have a star date.
All right.
I don't know star dates. Like, what am I? A star?
I don't know. That's what Captain whatever Picard says.
You think I got my education in the academy? Our destination is whatever road gets us off of this topic. That's right. It's our final Rust episode. You can't see it, but I put that in quotes with my fingers. I want to save some extra time for the end of the episode for a big announcement, and it'll make sense when we get there. So before we go any further, reference for today's episode comes from Deadline, NBC News, BBC News, CNN, Variety, Yahoo Entertainment, The Wrap, and basically the whole internet. Yes, all of the internet.
Can't believe a word of it.
Can't trust any of it. It's all fake news. So where we're going to start here is the pre-trial of Alec Baldwin. And I guess the question for y'all first is, do you feel we need a recap? Does anyone feel we need a recap? Or anyone want to summarize what's been going on?
I guess where did we leave off?
We left off with the HGR, the Hannah Gutierrez Reed
going to jail,
and that Alec's pre-trial was happening soon, but it was while we were off for the summer months.
Okay,
so.
and she went to jail.
She got her full 18 months. That was the max.
18 months. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. That was the max she could have.
Right.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is about the unfortunate death of Helena Hutchins, the DP from the show Rust, and how what's kind of gotten to the wayside in all this, as you'll see, is how Live Ammunition got on set seems to have taken a back seat as to just who to point fingers at and blame. So we're going to get into it. Anything else I got? Oh, well, I guess I sort of mentioned it, but all this went down while we were on hiatus before we started season 2. So some people listening might know some of this, some of them they don't. People probably were tuning out at this point. But it all kind of ends with like a weird anticlimactic apathy. And if you watch the Jake Paul Mike Tyson match, you probably feel similar. So what happened? For everyone playing, you may recall that the initial charges filed against Alec Baldwin were dropped. The new charges were brought up against Baldwin, and he, of course, pleaded not guilty to the new involuntary manslaughter charges, thus setting up a trial date. A different special prosecutor was brought in to lead the charge. Her name is Carrie Morrissey. A lot more on her in a bit. And a lot of this period was a lot of the legal mumbo jumbo. All of your typical legal moves and proceedings were taking place leading up to the trial, such as the defense wants the case thrown out because of this or that. Motions were filed, motions were denied. A plea offer was made to Baldwin's team at one point. It was very similar to the slap on the wrist given to the first AD, David Halls, which we've already discussed. Special Prosecutor Morrissey said the offer was made out of fairness, quote, in the spirit of ensuring that similarly situated defendants do not receive disparate treatment, end quote. This is interesting considering I could find no evidence of anything being offered to Hannah Gutierrez Reed. So I don't know what she means exactly about ensuring basically an even offer when that's not the case. But anywho's. In the end, it didn't matter because the prosecution retracted their offer, and the only explanation of any kind that was kind of given was a vague comment from Morrissey claiming that she withdrew the offer after learning of, quote, Mr. Baldwin's ongoing conduct that will continue to cause harm to the victims and their families, end quote. We get a small peek into what that could mean, which we'll get into in a sec, but whatever it means, we will likely never know the full story because it never really got fully elaborated on. No one questioned it really. There are some clues, like I mentioned. And there's a lot of accusations, proposed sanctions, motions, etc., filed by both sides. It very much felt like this got very personal. When you see a lot of, as we start reading into some of these quotes, there's a lot of passive aggressive commentary going on. It's kind of funny in some ways, despite it being about, such a sad circumstances. Morrissey's behavior after the trial ended is especially showing, which we'll of course get into. But just a lot of mudslinging. Zoe, this next thing, would you read? This sort of gets into a little bit of it, highlighting certain things.
Yeah, so the following highlights are some of the accusations made between the two sides. In the same aforementioned plea withdrawal, prosecutors accused Baldwin of attempting to persuade witnesses to the killing to participate in a documentary about Hutchinson's death in the hopes of improving his long-tarnished public image. Other accusations from the state side include, and I quote, Baldwin using his celebrity status to sway public opinion. Fair enough. Baldwin having a history of manipulating public opinion from his previous public run-ins, and various bullying tactics from his legal team led by Alex Spiro and Luke Nikas. Meanwhile, Team Alec made all kinds of amazing allegations, most interesting of which began claiming that Morrissey repeatedly leaked confidential information about the grand jury proceedings to an NBC reporter, trying to get her and co-counsel Jason Lewis removed from the case while requesting monetary penalties be imposed against Morrissey. The same day as the allegations were made by Nikas, NBC reported an unnamed source as saying that prosecutors hoped a trial would humble Baldwin and serve as a teachable moment. Okay. Morrissey denied the accusations, but did not deny speaking with an NBC reporter, nor saying that a trial would humble Baldwin, though she did go on to say, charges against Mr. Baldwin are not being pursued because of his criminal history, his impressive level of arrogance, or to teach him a lesson. So do with that as you will, et cetera, et cetera. So it's clear that things were getting ugly between both sides. More on this in a bit. Yeah.
So you can see that it's getting spicy. It's still a lot of stuff is being presented in legalese in these things, but it's that kind of reading between the lines. Like the fact that she not only calls him arrogant, but says impressive level of arrogance. And I will say, I mean, I've never worked with Alec Baldwin. No, I don't think I have. Yeah, I haven't. I feel like I'd remember that. He certainly has. He has come off that way in certain interviews, certain things. Sometimes it's just roles he plays, kind of thing. But okay, fair. I could see that. And I could see his very, well-paid lawyers being bullies, but that's what lawyers do. I mean,
yeah,
lawyers are often bullies. That's just what they are. So it certainly was getting messier leading up to the trial. And then July 12th of last year, only 4 days into the trial, Judge Mary Marlowe, Summer, dismissed the case altogether after a motion to dismiss was filed by his defense team over some bullets in question from evidence. And Justin, if you'd read this here in a second, it's crazy for all this hype and everything, how it just suddenly was done. And we'll get into it now, if you would.
Yeah. The decision by Judge Sommer to dismiss the case came 4 days into Baldwin's trial and at the end of a rocky evidentiary hearing over a defense motion to dismiss the case. The bullets in question were dropped off to police in the spring by ex-Arizona cop Troy Teskey, a close friend of still incarcerated Rust armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed's legendary gun coach father, Thel Reed.
That's wordy.
So Thel Reed was friends with Troy Teskey.
Correct.
Okay. The prosecution asserted that the bullets had nothing to do with the case, despite the apparent misfiling by the police. Whether an oversight or a lie, the admittance of tainted evidence was the final straw for the judge to throw out the case.
Yeah. So essentially, bullets showed up. They were delivered by someone not on the case that wasn't even like in that particular law enforcement jurisdiction. And they got submitted into evidence. And basically the prosecution was saying, oh no, it was a mistake. Those should have never been admitted into evidence. They have nothing to do with the case. And the defense is going like, well, if they had nothing to do in the case, why were they submitted into evidence? Or are we just going to go into the incompetence of you guys? So from the judge's standpoint, it became kind of like, well, whatever the reason, cause, whatever, the fact is that this is tainted evidence and this taints the case. And so it was enough for Judge Sommer to say, I'm done with all of you and case is done. So essentially, when it comes to evidence, there's a chain of command, and by having that chain of command broken, that's what they start consider tainted, because you can't trust the point A to point B of, say, from crime scene to court. There's a very particular chain that those things have to fall. When I was putting all this research together and reading different things, one of the things I read was in reference to Spiro and Lucas saying brilliant lawyering. And I actually had to stop for a minute. I'm like, is lawyering a word? I mean, it's in this article. It's got to be a word, right? But I was having this.
No, they're the law talking guy.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, hey, sweet lawyering.
Yeah.
So anyway, as you'd imagine, lead prosecutor Carrie Morrissey did not take this lightly. She will go on to file multiple appeals to salvage the case, each looking increasingly desperate and rejected equally by Judge Sommer. And as of the present, the state of New Mexico is seeking no new charges against Alec Baldwin, and his case stays dismissed. But for anyone believing Baldwin holds culpability, fear not, as there are a copious amount of civil suits he's tied to, of which we will not cover. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And then some suits I learned are ones he's actually filed against some of the former crew, where his team's pointing fingers. So that'll be a nice soup of a legal mess for years to come, unfortunately. But what gets comically bad is how awful the prosecution looked at the end of the saga, and the desperation filings didn't help anything. Justin, if you'd read the next piece.
Yep. Because the state's amended motion raises arguments previously made and arguments that the state elected not to raise earlier, the court does not find the amended motion well taken. The filing was also made outside of the time limit for such filings, to which Judge Sommer later continued, the amended motion is untimely, therefore the court does not find the amended motion well taken due to its untimeliness.
Yes. Well, if only we could speak this way in real life. I understand you want to go out, but your request is just not well received at this time. But if you want to file your request to go out later, we can do that.
Yeah.
It's very untimely for me. That's basically a polite way of saying this is poor and incorrect and get out of here.
Yeah, it's a waste of my time.
Yeah. So now we'll get into the aftermath of the trial, conclusion, some interesting asides. There's a lot more detail that we glossed over, and I mean, anyone listening, you're more than welcome to go down that rabbit hole. But a lot of it is just like beating a dead horse. The appeals got more desperate, like we said, and until very likely Morrissey was instructed to just give it up. I mean, that's my opinion. But the way it played out, I just don't know what boss would have not pulled her off the case and closed it, because it was just becoming a bad look. I don't know if it was the final filing, but one of the filings I remember reading, for example, that it was like an absurd 30 pages longer than it should have been. And I guess there's like a maximum size to these kind of things. And so the judge was pissed because there was extra reading. And there was that part of it. And then also in that same filing, they were only repeating things. There wasn't anything new, which is sort of what the judge was saying in that comment. But it was like, you brought us all here with, not only did you not even follow the procedure correctly, but you're not putting anything in here that's new or different. You're just kind of regurgitating the same thing over. So no, this is done. Like, unless you got something new, get the fuck out of here.
That's it. Also, I don't know. I'm not celebrity obsessed. I get celebrity obsession, whatever. But the whole we got to teach them a lesson.
Oh,
is so
actors aren't above the law.
And no, nobody's thinking that. It's, you know what I mean? It's complicated. It's weird. But why do we have to do this? We got to teach him a lesson.
I'll be the first to say
Who?
A lot of actors
do
not live in our universe.
No,
I'll
absolutely.
be the first to agree with that. It's almost impressive sometimes about how out of touch they can be with the universe that we live in. That said, I don't feel like they're somehow people that are on some plane that because of their public status or something like that, they need to be beholden to laws differently or something like that. I think it's the same process we all go through.
Yep.
I don't see any need to teach a lesson differently. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Then I'm like,
sure, maybe if we're talking about top politicians or something like that I do feel are above the law, okay, fine. But actors aren't that far. I mean, the worst thing I can think about actors is right now with the fires, which we haven't really talked about, but obviously our hearts go out to those that have been in it for one or worse reasons. But they. I read some stories about them using private firefighter services to, keep their properties okay. And that's a whole other debate and conversation. But, you can judge that one way or another. A, they have the money to do it, or B, morally, maybe it's wrong, whatever. But
also, that's anybody, the top 1%
exactly.
with money. It's all about money.
Exactly.
It's all about money.
Yeah. And that's not looking like they're above the law. It's just looking like they have means that, y'all, we don't have, kind of thing. Anyway.
Yeah.
So as Morrissey was told to give up the case, basically, it basically put an end to, as far as the criminal charges aspect go, makes Baldwin clear. But there are some interesting asides worth mentioning, and we're going to get to it in a second. But as far as the kind of anticlimactic end to this tragedy on the criminal side, how do y'all feel about the way this played out? I guess in terms of, do you feel like any justice was served? Do you feel like, it was poorly handled in hindsight? Is there an alternative you would have preferred? How do y'all feel after seeing this from point A to point B?
I feel like it was just always it was a safety issue. It was a safety issue that is in multiple people's hands. That's hard. It's hard to bring that in front of a jury. And personally, I don't think that Alec Baldwin should have had criminal charges against him. I've seen actors get handed stuff, and normally we have safety meetings about guns on set and all those things that we've talked about. But at the end of the day, I don't know, he held it. He thought it was clear. Oopsie daisy.
Yeah.
I think the people handing him that and, all the ammunition stuff, but I'm at the end of the day, 18 months is a long time. That was a young woman too. That sucks. I feel bad.
Yeah.
I feel bad for her. I do. It sounds like,
I heard nothing but lovely things about her. And,
I've been put in situations where my boss has told me to do something that I'm I don't really, I don't necessarily think that that's safe, or I don't feel comfortable with doing that. But for the sake of just moving on with my life and my day and saving face, all those things, like, you do it and it ends up being fine. So I do feel bad. I feel bad for her. 18 months doesn't seem like a long time compared to 10 years or whatever. But I think that we discredit how long that actually is to be away from your friends and family and sitting in a cell. Like, that sucks. 18 months is a long time. So I don't know. This has always been a tricky one for me. I feel kind of just bad for everybody.
Yeah.
It feels just icky and sad, and it feels like the people that were actually guilty kind of, I don't know, feels like they kind of found a scapegoat and were able to be like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Why didn't she get out whenever that same evidence was brought up?
So,
because that's even closer of a conflict of interest to her case.
They don't want to take
being
people out of
at
jail,
her
though.
family.
Yeah.
So that's actually the first thing I have in the asides, because Hannah's legal team lost an appeal using the same faulty evidence as a reason to have her case thrown out, and
That doesn't make any damn sense.
same Judge Summer, is the one who denied it. So it is interesting. The only thing I can think of, which this doesn't make it right, but it kind of going back to when we talked about what manslaughter is, as a charge, that states, and by that I mean just like the legal side of things, of governments, they feel that if somebody dies, there has to be culpability. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, someone went to jail and they don't want to release someone from jail because it makes it. I mean,
because David Hall's got the immunity and the slap on the wrist and all that, because he made the plea deal early on. I think he was the first to make a plea deal. That put him in the clear and absolved his culpability. And then by not having Alec, that kind of leaves Hannah, because they never charged the prop master. They never charged the ammo supply or anything, but that's all other litigation y'all are welcome to read about that we're not going into. But there's so much finger pointing and it's such a mess. It was not well handled by the police at certain points. The prosecution, I think in hindsight, had regrets about making the plea deal with Halls because they didn't have all the information yet. And once you make that deal and the paperwork signed, you can't undo it.
Yeah, no takes backs.
Yeah, no take you back.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's so much of like the legal system and like prison is like no takes backs.
Yeah, so
no, you're innocent. Sorry.
That's where you leave Hannah, and this is kind of just my opinion of it, but I think she just kind of becomes the figurehead of the finale of the crime. She's the only one that they could mete out a punishment. So the fact that it's 18 months, also, I could see where the judge is like, by the time, even if I said yes to this and it went through its process, you're probably almost out anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing I will say about...
And she could sue the city if it eventually...
She could turn it...
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, appeals are a whole thing, man. It's... Yeah. So it's just,
her jail...
They would drag it out purposefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, her jail calls, which... I would say of all this reading, I have ascertained that she might not be the brightest crayon in the box of certain things. She definitely, her youthfulness shows in a lot of comments and stuff that she's made. But when she was in jail, her phone conversations, which, my God, anyone, if you don't listen or watch true crime, maybe you don't know this is common knowledge, but don't just talk casually on a jailhouse phone. They're always listening and they're always recording, and you're an idiot.
Yep.
So, of course, she said things about how she shouldn't be there. She had no culpability, didn't have any signs of remorse or anything like that. It was just, I shouldn't be here. This is bullshit, blah, blah, blah. And that was kind of it. So, I mean, take that for what you will, in her own... I mean, yeah, she has a hand in it. I mean, for sure. But she also, as we've already talked about, young, inexperienced. The movie was poorly handled all around. The fact that
also people love to throw around that they didn't show any remorse. I'm like, they can't show remorse every second of the day.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Her
Controversial.
Pretty pissed too.
Yeah, I would too. Like you can, I don't know, you can feel bad about something and but also, that shit's recorded, bitch. Come on.
her being I mean, I certainly would be in her shoes of anger of like I'm the fall person on this because no one else is taking a blame, kind of thing. And the way it played out, she was kind of the only person to go after just because the way the prosecution handled it.
Yeah.
So you left her and Alec as the only viable options to, because you had already worked your way out of these other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, all of this is sort of going past the whole issue of there was real ammo on a film set and still don't know how it got there. Probably will never be clear how it got there. And to me, that should have been the core of the investigation, is trying to figure out how on earth this could have, like, what are the possibilities? There can only be a handful. So what are the possibilities, and explore each one of those. But I think also our film universe is such a weird universe to an outside person, and which again we've already talked about, but it makes it hard for our stuff to translate back into, I'll just call it real world stuff. Sometimes when we're looking for work, because there is no work, it's hard to translate our normal film jobs into regular world jobs.
It is. It's not an assembly line. It's always kind of different. Even if it's the same, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. You know what I mean? Based on even just location, the script, things like that it's hard to really.
And we do follow.
I imagine like a detective, investigator, lawyer, whatever would have a kind of a hard time.
Well, and they
didn't
know who's an expert we should be talking to. They didn't know the right people they should be talking to.
Yeah.
And they talked to a lot of people they shouldn't have been talking to. A lot of people that just wanted to be in the spotlight for, their 15 minutes of fame or whatever you say. And it's what it is at this point. But as an industry, we do follow OSHA, which is the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, for anyone that doesn't know that. And anytime an industry, and this could be auto workers, this could be glass factory, it could be whatever. We all follow the same OSHA, coast to coast in the U.S. And OSHA, as a standard, did their own investigation, which they always do when a safety accident happens. And the very first thing they did was wipe the number of days since last accident, and they reset it to 0. No, I'm kidding. They always make sure that thing's correct. But no, they did their own investigation, and they had concluded that, quote, Baldwin, though he was a producer on the film, was not in a position of management authority and was not culpable for the lack of oversight, end quote. And I thought it was worth mention because this is coming from OSHA. It's the same group that would investigate any safety accident. And they're probably more film aware just because we follow their standards and agreements and things than, say,
Johnny
the prosecution or Johnny Cop. Johnny
Cop.
La. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so a couple other asides. So had the case gone to full trial, the Colt replica, and just to be clear, I'm saying replica in terms of it's a remake of a 19th century handgun, not that it's what we also in the industry call a replica, which is just a hunk of metal that looks like a real gun and doesn't fire.
Yeah, a Faco.
Yeah. There were a lot of issues that were not well reported on. So, like, to give you an example, it's commonly reported that particular Colt in question was tested by the FBI, and the conclusion was that it could not fire without a trigger pull. And Baldwin repeatedly denied he ever pulled the trigger. That part got a lot of press. But what got less press is that the weapon had apparently been modified before it was used. It's never been clear what the modifications were, but when they were doing testing, the weapon also got damaged during testing, had to be rebuilt. So whatever damage happened to it, they had to rebuild the gun. And we don't know what degree of damage and repair because it's never been made clear. But that all seems to me to muddy and this might be why they were being sensitive about it, because you start putting in those little details and that FBI report starts having holes in it because of all these other things that are getting less mention. And I think it's safe to say that had Baldwin's trial gone full length, that probably would have been one of the center points about it. Would have been a myriad of experts parading in for both sides, saying this and that, and you would have gotten into all this extremely boring stuff about the makings of this gun. So we'll just never know at this point. And then lastly, I want to throw in Alec himself has recently made claims that a lot of new information will soon be revealed about the shooting, and he claimed to be the victim of a smear campaign. For a man that hates Trump, it sure reeks of the same shitty ilk. They're all out to get him. So that, my friends, is the conclusion of the Rust tragedy and the extremely avoidable and senseless death of Helena Hutchins, who we don't want to lose sight of in this entire thing. She is the tragic victim in this quagmire. So, any, I guess, final thoughts before I get to our big announcement? Any Rust closing comments?
No, that's the crest of it.
Yeah. Are your mouths rusted shut? Am I right?
No, it's just sad.
Yeah.
It's a sad
and it's turned into a
drag,
circus,
and it's sad that a woman died just doing her job, man. She's freako. Yeah.
Over under that Hannah will be a armor on a film set again.
No.
1. I'm going to say the over-under's at 1.
She's a felon. Well, actually, no. Felon's can work in film. Yeah. Never mind. Forget it. She's good. Yeah, she'll be back.
That.
She'll be back.
She'll be back.
Yeah.
Forget it. So I was like, finding a job as a felon. But I'm like, oh, yeah, no. Nobody. Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, if there's something interesting that crops up in the news, we might mention it, but we're certainly not going to do any more episode coverage on it. We have beaten that dead horse. But we hope that y'all enjoyed the series. And we kind of got the idea that we could use this to branch into maybe a new series that we're going to start. So the big announcement is that we're going to have a new segment that's going to highlight other kind of senseless and avoidable deaths from previous projects. And the hope is in doing this is to not only remember those that lost their lives and keep names in memory, but also to do our part to kind of keep safety in perspective in hopes of better working conditions for crew and actors. That's something that I think we were off mic, we were talking earlier, but it was never really the full intention of this podcast to be so safety oriented, but it's a theme that we keep coming back to in a lot of these things. And basically to separate this from, say, the legendary lores, I'm going to keep those at like, this is crazy. This is, it's almost shocking no one died on Super Mario Brothers kind of thing. And then say for this installment, we'll cover things like Brandon Lee, The Crow, the helicopter crash in the Twilight Zone movie, camera assistant Sarah Jones, both the 1925 and 59 Ben-Hur movies. Although the 1959 one might be a legendary lore. Anyhoo's. Camera assistant Brent Hirschman, special effects tech Clifford Wenger, I hope I didn't mispronounce that. And sadly, there's a lot. And what I didn't put on the short list is a stunt person because, as y'all could probably imagine, they're way above everyone else in the death category, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuntmen that die, even contemporary, that just don't really get a lot of reporting and stuff. There's a lot of injury and death. I've definitely been on some shows where stuntmen have gotten severely injured. Luckily, no one died. But yeah, they still, even with today's technology and everything else, it's still a very dangerous world for stuntmen and women. Stunt people. There we go. So stunt people are people too. So I think one of the things that we're lacking for this at the moment, and I invite Zoe and Justin and the ghosts of Chris and Joe, and as well as people listening, we need to come up with a good title for this new segment. And so that's something I've been wrestling with. But if anyone has any good ideas, feel free to email us. I think that would be fun to come up with something. So I think the way I'm going to say, we're closing a window, but we're opening a door. So with that said, well, I guess before that? One
Closing
last
a
thing.
door, opening a window.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever.
Yeah,
Climbing out the window, going back through the door.
yeah.
Yeah.
Getting
then
out of
closing the
basement,
window
going
again.
in the attic. I don't know.
We got an elevator. No.
Yeah. Going from the first floor to the whatever. Any comments as far as like our new segment or anything like that? Justin, you already knew. Zoe, it's kind of news for you. What do you think?
I like it.
Yeah.
Everything comes back to safety.
Yeah.
And I mean, even just, I don't know, things where I kind of feel like we're inherently unsafe, but try to be safe. And there are, I don't know, I got a whole nuanced opinion on safety.
I will say, after taking the OSHA, we call it the OSHA 10 class. When I took the OSHA 10 class, I think everyone has a similar thing experience, but there's about somewhere between like 5 days to a week kind of period where you immediately get out of that class, and for that first like say 5-ish days,
You're an expert on all the safety things.
you
and you're
notice
an asshole
everything
about it.
You notice everything. Those stairs have no rail.
Yeah, I think
This is
it
not
was like
4 inches off the ground.
2 weeks for me. I was like, that's not OSHA approved.
You can't help it.
No, you can't. And I mean, I think
man's
that's
welding
why,
without a mask.
that's why safety issues happen, because that person is fucking annoying. They're annoying. So it's just like, whatever. I've done it like this before, and then that's how accidents happen.
Right,
Because you don't
exactly.
want to be that person,
No.
even when you do notice.
No.
I mean, there's one thing like a big safety thing of like, come on, guys, but it's the little things that. Anytime that person's around, it's like, you fuck off.
You're as popular as a COVID compliance officer. For
Yeah.
anyone who remembers
It's
those.
nobody likes
Call
the
back to
hall
last week.
monitor. Nobody likes the hall monitor. That's the reason why bullies exist.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
It is weird because what you learn is that a lot of safety is common sense. You just don't usually think about it because you just kind of do it inherently. But there is a lot of stuff where it's like, hey, this is a hot stove. If I touch it, I'll burn my hand kind of concept.
Yeah, godoy.
And then when someone does it, you go, no, why did he do that? He knew that was hot. Like, that's a weird one. Okay. So, sometimes shit just happens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, Justin, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm a big advocate for safety, but I can definitely use my own reminders from time to time, so it'll be good.
Yeah.
Because I get in the zone and I let things fly.
We
a
all
lot of
do, though.
times.
I mean, our job it sometimes calls for being a little bit unsafe in that moment. You have to do something quickly. That's what the scene is calling for, and nobody's you know what I mean? Like
Nobody's looking.
Nobody's looking or whatever. And it's nothing like something big and insane and dangerous. It's just like a little small thing that's just like, oh, maybe this isn't, but
Yeah,
whatever.
I might fall off this ladder and break my ankle, but I probably won't die.
Yeah,
Nobody else is going to get hurt.
I've hopped off a lift gate being like, it's fine. I'm young. I can do this. But I'm like, oh man, if I were to just kind of lose my footing a little bit, I might really hurt myself. Why
or
did I?
slippery because it rains. Or something,
like it's things like that.
It's not too indifferent about peeing in public and trying not to get caught.
Oh, I'm peeing all over the place on set.
I know I shouldn't do this, but man, do I really need to go right now? And I don't want to have to go all the way over there. And so anyway,
As far as pee goes, pee where you gotta pee. That's the safe thing to do.
I'm wearing a diaper
Don't
right
hold
now.
it in, because that reminds me of
we're true Frenchmen here.
Don't hold it in. I mean, I've been on shows where there've been like PAs and background extras who have felt like they needed to hold it in because they couldn't go to a bathroom because a scene was about to start or something like that. Don't hold it in. They can wait for you.
Yeah. Agreed.
That's the safe thing.
Yeah. The moral here today is pee when you got to pee, and respect your hall monitors.
Yeah.
All right. So like we said, we're closing a garage door and opening a safe door,
Car window.
a car window,
Car
yes.
hole.
That's the analogy. Car hole. So thank you, and we hope you keep enjoying the show. Please subscribe, rate, and review, all that stuff. It's not just a thing that podcasts ask of listeners. It's actually vital to us continuing. So if you like what we're doing, take a minute and be like Suze with big hair and Libra for Justice. I got both of those right?
Suze has big hair.
Suze has big hair. Which,
if you like something, say something.
Yeah, it helps us out a lot. And Zoe, you're just itching to say something over there, aren't you?
Yes. Do you like what we're doing here? Do you have thoughts, comments, questions? Maybe you have an idea or suggestion for topics you want to hear about? Well, you can find us on the interwebs. You can email us at filmfolklorepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on the social medias, Instagram being Film Folklore Podcast. We have a Facebook group called Film Folklore, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at The Film Folk. And yeah, thanks for joining us today.
All right, thanks everybody. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye.